Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Majesty of Dragons by Dragalisco. Majesty of Dragons is a Kickstarter game that will, well, I'll have a link down below. It's either on Kickstarter, will be on Kickstarter, link is in the description down below. And this is a prototype, rules, components, all that stuff, subject to change. And with that, this is a two-player head-to-head game of trying to, well, collect dragons and win. That's the high-level overview. You're going to have your dragons in the row over here. You're going to be trying to bid on and gather those dragons. You're going to be buying a bunch of other things from various abilities to the lores you have. You're going to be starting with quests in your hand, and all this is designed to help you win the game. As far as how you win, well, that part we're going to have to timestamp on its own, because the way you win this game is a fewfold. The first thing is, in this game, you're going to be collecting dragons, but at some points, once you have dragons in front of you, dragons will be facing off and fighting against another. And once dragons are facing off and fighting, what you're going to do is whenever you kill an opponent's dragon, you will collect one dragon rage. This dragon rage over here is going to be one of the things you need to win the game, because if you get 5 dragon rage, well, then you win the game. Way number 2, you win the game, and this is one of a bunch of options. Way number 2 is you'll see over here that some dragons have a nemesis icon on them. This little N over here, that's a nemesis dragon. The rest of these don't have them, but there are a lot of nemesis dragons in this deck, and if at any point you collect 5 nemesis dragons, you win the game. You can only have 5 dragons at once, which means you have to work to achieve that goal, because you'll have to have the dragons replace those other dragons, or have those dragons killed, but 5 nemesis dragons is the second way you win. The third is that each dragon has a majesty value. If you look at the dragons, you'll see copper, silver, and gold dragon helms, and that's going to be worth 1, 2, or 3 majesty respectively. And in those, when you achieve 20 total majesty of dragons, which is hard, you might be doing the math there and thinking, well, 3 times 5, how is 3 times 5? Even if I achieve gold and I can only have 5 dragons, how do I get to 20 majesty? Rules and cards and things that will help you get there. But if you ever achieve 20 majesty, well, that's the third way you win the game. Next up is you're going to be bidding on these dragons using dragon orbs. Every single turn you're going to be getting 4 orbs, which you'll be using to go ahead and bid on the dragons. But if at any point you have if you ever have 30 dragon orbs in front of you, well, then you win the game. And then lastly, before all that's not enough for you, if at any point the dragon deck runs out, we go to immediate sudden death victory, where whoever has the most majesty wins the game. Majesty, once again, are going to be those little copper, silver, and gold icons on the dragons. That's how you win, a whole bunch of ways. So you're either trying to kill dragons, collect certain dragons, collect dragon orbs, a whole bunch of ways in terms of how you're going to win the game, ways that lead to fascinating little decisions as far as the different pressure points you apply to other players as you attempt to win this game. As far as the gameplay itself, every single turn, players are going to collect 4 dragon orbs each. There are some exceptions to this, we'll talk about these things shortly, but for right now, let's just focus on the fact that every player is going to get 4 dragon orbs in front of them, and then they're going to use them. The active player, let's pretend they're the active player, the active player will choose which dragon to bid on. So for example, maybe I really want this dragon over here, so I'm going to bid 3 on this dragon. In fact, if I really wanted, I'd bid 4, because if I bid 4, then they would not be able to bid it. I'm going to go ahead and bid 3, and we'll see what happens over here, whether they outbid me or not. They are, actually I'm going to bid 4. I'm going to bid 4 on this dragon, and we'll see they now cannot outbid me, and then because they can't outbid me, I will take this dragon, put it in front of me. They will also have the opportunity to buy a dragon, and maybe they go ahead and they buy this Yakram dragon over here. They pay 3 for that one, putting it in front of them, paying their 3 orbs to the supply. The game has started, we've started bidding on dragons. Every single turn, regardless of who is the active player or not, you will have opportunities to get a dragon. So that's a big part of the game. Regardless of whose turn it is, you can get your hands on a dragon. From there, I can choose to attack or not. Choosing to attack is interesting because, well, very often it's a messy affair. Right now, if I chose to attack, I'd be comparing my 5 and my 3 against their 4 and their 5, with the caveat that red dragons, all dragons have a special ability, well, mostly all dragons have a special ability, but red dragon special abilities is they win ties. Green dragons have the special ability that whoever has the most green dragons collects an extra dragon orb doing the selection process, although I should have paid for mine over here. But whoever has green dragons is going to collect an extra dragon orb, whoever has the most green dragons. Red dragons will win ties. Purple dragons are worth an extra majesty. So for example, if you have 5 purple dragons, then this is going to be 5 gold purple dragons. They're 4 each. So these are going to be 2, they're going to be, well, 2 for copper, 3 for silver, and 4 for gold as far as the majesty value of purple dragons. And then gray dragons are boring and have no actual ability. But right now, if I go ahead and attack, I would go ahead and be comparing my 5 and my 3 versus the defender. The problem is they get to choose who actually defends against whom. The attacker has the choice of attacking, but the defender gets to assign their dragons. So right now, a 5 versus 3 right now would play out as follows. I'd attack with my 5 versus 3. They would pair them up this way, which means they'd have a tie-winning red dragon, and then the 4 would beat my 3, and I would lose both my dragons, which means right now, it's not a good time for me to attack. Versus if the reverse is true, if I wait for them to attack, again, it's still not great for me, but it's better for me because I can pair up my 5 against their 4, killing their 4. I can have my 3 lose to theirs, and it's 1 versus 1, which means the defender always has more agency over how the battle goes, versus the attacker has the agency of when they are actually willing to initiate that attack and see just how damaging things can be. When you're done with the attacking phase, you get to buy all the fun stuff. The fun stuff specifically are going to be all these cards on the side over here, where you can pay their value in Dragon Orbs to get various abilities, either ongoing abilities. So for instance, this Millennial Dragon Tree costs me 6, but it gives me an extra token, an extra Dragon Orb every single turn. This one gives me an extra +4 to my total Majesty. Now I only need 16 Remaining Majesty if I have that. So you can see how there's different ways of breaking different things, including some things that will, like over here we have increase your dragon limit by 1. I can hold on to 6 dragons instead of 5, which is relevant to combat, by the way. In combat, if you ever have more dragons than the opposing player, then when all the assignees are done, you get to add that dragon on top of everything else, which can be incredibly helpful in terms of your goal of actually winning the battle and collecting Dragon Rage. When you're done with all of that, over here we have these cards over here. On this side we have the Dragon Lords. You'll start the game with a Dragon Lord that gives you a unique ability. You'll have the opportunity to buy more Dragon Lords, and that cost goes down every single round. You're going to, every time a Dragon Lord is not purchased, you'll remove 1 counter from the pile, and that is the new cost to buy a Dragon Lord. And eventually when a Dragon Lord is purchased, that pile will reset to the top, making the Dragon Lords once again more expensive. But again, they have lots of fun abilities. We have over here Tarkax Null, who is whenever you attack, gain 3 Dragon Orbs. That can highly incentivize attacking, but you have to make sure you can win. We have over here, we have Arbluth. Your progress cards cost you 2 less. These progress cards over here, they're all going to cost you 2 Dragon Orbs less, making her excellent if you're going for those powers and abilities left, right, and center. And when you're done with all that, you're going to be done, and then your opponent goes through the same process, taking the same exact turn. Generating Dragon Orbs, bidding on dragons, each player has the opportunity to get at least 1 dragon, then going ahead and choosing whether to attack or not, then choosing whether to grab their progress cards or lords, and lastly, we have the various quests you'll start with. Players will start the game with 4 quests, and they can cash in those quests at any time to get Dragon Orb rewards. If I have a total Majesty of 10 or higher, I can cash this in for 3 immediate Dragon Orbs, helping me buy the various things that will help my engine be, well, stronger. We have control 3 Dragons of Might 5 or fewer, control reward 3 Dragon Orbs. Control 3 red Chaos Dragons, 4 Dragon Orbs. You have a bunch of quests from a giant stack of quest cards that will give you extra ways to get Dragon Orbs, extra ways to build up your engine, to build up your tableau, as you try to pursue one of a variety of different victory options, while being mindful of the fact that your opponents and yourself are constantly pushing those different levers in different ways to try to achieve victory, and hopefully see how it goes, and, well, hopefully win. And that's Majesty Dragons. That's how this game plays. It's time for the review, starting off with ease of play. Ease of play is pretty good, although it does need a play rate. Again, prototype, so no judgment here yet. But it very much needs a play rate to cover both the 5 different victory conditions, as well as the fact of how the dragons are all different. Because there's no indicator on the dragons telling you they're different. There's no symbols there. It's just we know the dragons are different, and we know there's 5 different ways to win. It needs that on our play rate because that is important and relevant information to constantly have access to. Past that though, fairly easy game to teach, to learn. The game takes maybe... A long game can run to 40 minutes, but I'd say it's usually close to 25-30 minutes as far as going back and forth, trying to achieve your victories, trying to push those various levers, and ultimately one player will somehow manage to persevere in one arena of combat that you weren't tracking them hard enough, that you weren't fighting back enough hard against. Past that, as far as player count, this is a 2-player game and only a 2-player game, so I have only played this one at 2 players. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with what I like, which is the multiple ways to win. I like that a lot in this game. I like the fact that there's not just a singular do X, Y, and Z to win, there's do any of these different things to win the game. That results in a constant push and pull as you start your plans, you start your goal with, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try to achieve a bunch of Dragon Orbs. I'll be conservative with my money, I'll be thrifty with it, but if I can get a bunch of Dragon Orbs, maybe that could be the fastest way to victory. But while you're trying to collect those Dragon Orbs in front of you and hoard them all up, your opponent's in the meantime buying all those fun things that will get in the way of you actually winning, and so you're trying to be mindful of that back and forth. Do I have to start spending my orbs? If I start spending my orbs, it's taken away from the way I'm currently trying to win, but I can use that to buy one of these progress cards that's going to instantly kill their dragon and take them out, which will both give me a rage and hurt their tableau, maybe enabling me to attack, and I can pivot to an attack-based strategy. Or alternatively, maybe I'm going for Nemesis Dragons, but my opponent just killed some Nemesis Dragons, so now I have to rebuild them up. But there's no more Nemesis Dragons in the marketplace. What do I want to do if there's only 2 Nemesis Dragons left and I don't have enough yet to win? There are a bunch of ways you can try to pursue victory in this game, and all the lords and progress cards will enable you and give you different tools at your disposal. If your opponent ever has 4 Nemesis Dragons, you should be afraid, because one of the progress cards lets you hunt through the deck and add a dragon to your tableau, which means they can hunt through and get a 5th Nemesis Dragon. There's all these different pressure points and levers, all based on the multiple pathways towards victory, the fact that there are different ways to win the game. And so I like that fact offhand. And then the quests, lords, and progress progress cards all give you different fun things to pursue, different fun things that are compelling in all their own different ways. These lords are incredibly powerful. They all give you this whole stack of lords. Every single one of them gives you a different way or incentive as to how you are going to try to push your victory, of what a progressive advantage you have over your opponent, and how you can use that towards your advantage, whether you're getting extra dragon orbs, whether you have extra access to dragons, whether you get things for combat. There's a ton of different things you have. The dragon lords are all incredibly impactful, and they get cheaper every single round, which means inherently the dragon lords are entering the game. There will be a point where dragon lord costs 2 and you'll buy the dragon lord for 2 if it hasn't been purchased already. The decreasing cost means these will constantly be entering the game. Additionally, we have the progress cards, which are expensive, but once you build up, once you start cashing in quests and you get that extra chunk of things, you start getting the opportunity to start buying these. Even just getting this millennial dragon tree over here, giving you an extra dragon orb every round, that will pay for itself faster than you know, because the turns go by quickly in this game as you slowly build up your armies, you slowly build up your dragons, and build up your tableau. Getting all these things is incredibly important, and trying to achieve victory here is incredibly important in the game, and the different ways the progress cards, the quests, and the lords enable that all give you a ton of fun abilities to the game. And then lastly, there's a very tense back and forth to the game as you're trying to assure your opponent does not win. That whole aspect of multiple pathways to victory, you're constantly trying to play off your opponent, reacting to what they do. They buy that dragon, well then you have to pivot from your plans of buying this dragon because they're otherwise too strong. I may have been trying to get another green dragon over here to help me win, to help me strengthen my extra dragon orbs every single turn, but they just bought this 10 over here, which means I now need to buy this 12, so I actually have a chance of defeating them, because this game is often not about the actual attacking or defending, rather it's about the fact that as opponents or as the players do things, it forces a game state where you have to react to that. When you buy a dragon and I buy a counter dragon, it might just mean that we continue the stalemate of not attacking each other, but that continues the game. And then there are going to be those points where you eventually do attack, the points where you eventually do buy a card that kills someone out. There's always going to be that back and forth to the game that is immensely rewarding to go through. As far as what I don't like about the game, first of all is going to be the fact that the initial economy can be very slow. Dragging 4 orbs a turn at the beginning of the game is not a lot. It's barely enough to keep up with the dragons, which means it can be several turns before you get to a point where you can actually start cashing in quests because you finally achieve something. You need those quests to kind of get out of that little stuck period where you just don't have enough going on. You're going to be trying to buy dragons, because if you don't buy dragons, your opponent's going to buy dragons, and if your opponent attacks you when you have no dragons, you lose a lot of rage. So you can't just go with like a, oh, I have no dragon strategy. That will result in you losing, and so this game does start very slowly. It takes several turns before you start having an actual cycle of the fun stuff actually beginning. So it's a slow start to the game. Secondly is the simultaneous dragon purchasing can be a bit confusing. I think it's essential, but it's a bit confusing because you kind of have this phase where you go back and forth and you cover all your stuff, and then on your turn, both players purchase a dragon, but everything else the agency is up to you. So I choose which dragon to bid on, I choose whether to attack, I choose whether to buy progress and lord cards, but we're both buying a dragon. That is a little bit confusing, but it's also essential. So it's not really something I would say it's not intuitive, but I understand why it has to exist, because otherwise you just get to attack with more dragons, which doesn't work out very nicely. And so I understand why it exists, but it's a drop confusing. And then secondly, like I already mentioned already, it definitely needs a player aid, and I also kind of wish the dragons had more abilities. Right now we have 4 dragons, and we have 4 dragons, each with their own ability. None of that's really represented well on the dragons. I almost wish the dragons had it on them. Also, I wish the gray dragons weren't boring. I wish they had their own ability, and I wouldn't mind text-based dragons in the game. I would not mind if some of the dragons were more interesting. I like the game. I like the fact that they have progress cards and lords and all these abilities and quests, but I wouldn't mind if there was more text on some of the dragons, and definitely I'd love the gray dragons to have an ability, as opposed to, hey, we have 4 dragons, this one's special, that one's special, and the gray ones just aren't. They're just not special. As far as what I can see others not liking, first of all, this is very much a head-to-head game. This is very much a head-to-head, conflict-driven game where you will do mean things to each other. 100% you will. You will be attacking each other, taking down their dragons. You'll be using cards that hurt your opponent. This is very much a in-your-face game that is all about trying to stop your opponent from winning while you try to win yourself. You have to be okay with that. Additionally, battle to a large extent strongly favors the defense, which you might not like. This is not a game where a lot of battles happen. This is a game where it's constantly about the threat of battle, and so very often you're prepping and reacting and adjusting, but the actual battles I find are fairly infrequent in this game, to the point that that Dragon Lord that I showed you over earlier, whenever you attack gain +3, I wouldn't pick him, at least not based on my plays, because our plays have been very defensive in nature, and I would not be able to use that a lot, because more often than not, if I attack, bad things are happening. I'm only willing to attack when good things are happening, and that particular situation is far, far less frequent. And then lastly, the game can have a very abrupt end, which you have to be okay with. This game is a constant back and forth, chess move versus chess move, action and reaction again and again, as I see what you do, as I try to react, and then eventually suddenly something happens. That could be I get my 5th Nemesis Dragon, the game just ends. It could be the fact that I finally managed to get an attack in, and I get 4 rage in a single attack because I just overpowered you. This game can absolutely have quick and abrupt endings to what otherwise feels like a very tense back and forth, followed by someone just winning the game. As far as final thoughts on Majesty of Dragons, I really like this game. This is one that I had a chance to play on TTS before I took it on for coverage, and I started the game off by not being overly impressed, but that's because I was taught the game without the progress cards and without the lords, and so I was taught a fairly boring game of just the dragons in the middle. And it wasn't bad, it was totally fine, it was a competent game of going back and forth, and I kind of finished and I was like, you know what, that was fine, but also not that interesting. And then everything else, the quests, the progress cards, and the lords were all revealed to me, and I was like, well, now we have an actual game here. Now we have a core concept that has a bunch of winning conditions, a bunch of ways to try to achieve things, a very simple structure, and a whole bunch of auxiliary things that all give you other ways to focus your attention and energy that is tremendously satisfying. I really like the back and forth structure that this game gives. It is only a 2-player game. It's a very head-to-head game. You have to be okay with a lot of the elements of what this game is doing and whether it's a fit for you or not, but it gives you a very solid 2-player puzzle. Another 2-player puzzle that I'm happy to add to my list of 2-player games that I thoroughly enjoy because I thoroughly enjoy Majesty of Dragons. This one is a 4 out of 5 for me. I do wonder what it holds up on over time. This is a game where, to me, the biggest thing that keeps me interested in it is all the lores and progress cards and all the peripheral elements that make it interesting to dive into it, and it's the kind of game where I want to see more. I want to see more content, whether now, whether the Kickstarter, whether down the road. I definitely want this to be a game that I continue to find interesting over time. For right now, I very much enjoy the tactical back and forth that this gives me in a very accessible playtime. As far as other game recommendations, first of all, there's going to be Dragonheart. Dragonheart is an older 2-player game, probably out of print, hard to get your hands on it. I believe you can play it on Board Game Arena if you want to try it out, but while it's a very different game, it does have a tense 2-player back and forth game based around dragons that I really enjoyed for a very long time before eventually getting rid of it, but I really enjoyed Dragonheart, and just having a 2-player head-to-head dragon-based game just made me think of that one. And then secondly, and this one's a bit of a stretch, feels very different but also similar at the same time, is Tsar. Tsar is an abstract game, a 2-player abstract game that is totally different, but it has one thing that very much gives me the same feeling as when I play Majesty of Dragons, which is the fact that in Tsar there's different victory conditions, there's different ways to win the game, and so you're constantly on your toes when you play Tsar as to that aspect of, I might be fighting you in this arena, but I have to be careful that you didn't pivot to the other arena. I wasn't paying attention to how you can win that way too. I find that's very prevalent in Majesty of Dragons, that idea that I'm not just being mindful of what you're doing right now, but I have to be mindful of all the ways you can suddenly sneak a win through to me in the ways I wasn't paying attention. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this video helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.